Should I eat carnivore diet and will it help me with my migraines? I can't wait to talk about this with you today because I love to test out different diets. So even before I became a naturopathic doctor, when I started on my own recovery from migraine headaches, one of the things that I became really fascinated with was nutrition and different ways of eating. So whenever there's a new sort of fad way of eating or fad diet, I will give it a try. So when the carnivore diet came out, I definitely gave it a whirl. So when I first started becoming familiar with carnivore diet, it was around 2019 when it really started to hit. And now it is something that is pretty widely touted, widely promoted within the migraine community as something that you should do, a way of eating that you should adopt to stop getting migraines or reduce how many migraines you're getting. So I have eaten carnivore diet and some of the common variations of the carnivore diets, so I can give you some firsthand analysis. And what I want to talk about today is why the carnivore diet might actually work, right? It's going to be helpful for a certain number of people. And so I'm going to talk about what it is about the carnivore diet that might actually help your migraines, but I don't think it's necessary, okay? So I'm going to talk about why you don't have to eat a carnivore diet and what some of the downsides are. And then I'm going to talk about just a better approach and how I approach eating habits with my clients. So first of all, what is carnivore diet? So the carnivore diet is a way of eating where in the most purest form, you are basically only eating animal foods, okay? So this is sort of the absolute opposite end of the spectrum from the vegan diet, right? Which is only plants, not even things like dairy products or eggs or something like that would be found within vegetarianism. It's the absolute opposite end of the spectrum from veganism, where you're only eating animal foods. And in particular, within the carnivore diet, red meat or beef is widely promoted as really the sort of optimal animal food that you're going to eat while on the carnivore diet. Eggs would probably be a close second. But in general, again, in the sort of the strictest or purest carnivore diet advocates, they're going to have people really not focus on chicken or pork, not as much seafood. I mean, if you're going to eat fish or seafood, you're going to be eating wild caught salmon, things like that. You're not going to be eating, farm raised salmon or, some of the whiter fleshed fish. So with the purest carnivore diet proponents, you're really eating beef and eggs pretty much. And that would be the only thing that you would eat. So whenever you get hungry, you would be eating eggs or beef, red meat. A lot of steaks, a lot of ribeyes. This is a way of eating that immediately is not that appealing to people. I really like beef. That's one of my favorite animal foods. But do I want to eat that? That's the only thing that I'm eating. And then particularly steak, particularly ribeye steak, because it's a fattier cut. Do I only want to eat ribeye? Okay, so immediately it's obviously a pretty extreme way of eating and a way of eating that isn't going to be very appealing to a lot of people. But why would it catch on, right? Why would it be recommended and why would people get a lot of benefits from it? So the benefits that are touted with carnivore diet outside of, say, the migraine community where everybody's focused on reducing their migraines, the general public, why would somebody in the general public with sort of a wider array of health concerns be interested in doing the carnivore diet? So people will report a decrease in skin conditions. So people that are plagued by psoriasis, eczema, hives, just general itchiness and rashes, they will report a marked improvement if they consume just animal foods, if they go carnivore, right? So skin issues is something that's very widely touted, and also lung issues. So things like asthma, chronic bronchitis, just people where, every time they get sick, they're going to have a lung issue. That is widely touted within the carnivore diet. proponents. Weight loss, okay, so that's something that is touted. So another category of people that are recommended to eat carnivore diet would be diabetics, people who have difficulty managing their blood sugar, people who have what we might call general inflammation. So they have a lot of sore muscles, sore joints, arthritis. Just people will say, "Well, I just feel inflamed," right? Things hurt, my hands hurt, my knees hurt going up the stairs, those types of complaints. And then allergies. So this kind of goes alongside with things like asthma and skin conditions, but just allergies, people where, there's just a little tiny amount of pollen in the air and they're just sneezing and their eyes are watering and so on. So those are probably just off the top of my head the most common health concerns where people are recommended to eat a carnivore diet. And then within the migraine community, there are some prominent people that work within the migraine space that are now advocating a carnivore diet. And I think this is why it's really taken off within the migraine community and why people have a question about it. In the strictest form of carnivore diet, you're just eating meat, probably red meat and eggs. There are some less extreme variations. Sometimes it's called the cowboy diet, where you're just eating beef and beans. So I've done this one too. So you're having maybe ground beef with some black beans or, different combinations of cuts of beef and different kinds of beans. So they call that the cowboy diet. Obviously, the stereotype of like the cowboy sitting around the campfire eating beans out of a can and, their fresh beef from the herd, right? So that's kind of where that comes from. And then even less extreme from that, people will be eating basically, red meat and eggs predominantly, but then they might be incorporating things like honey, right? So kind of because bees make honey and bees are animals, I guess. Honey is touted or berries. So now you're almost sort of blending elements of what is called the paleo diet into the carnivore diet. So the paleo diet is the theory that we should be eating what humans ate when we were first evolved and we were living as hunter-gatherers, right? So before we started growing things, before there was agriculture, and we started selectively breeding different types of plants and so on to make them more amenable to cultivation. We were just hunting and gathering. We should just eat those foods that sort of exist in their original state before humans started selectively breeding things. So that is probably the least extreme form of carnivore diet, and it, to me, is sort of a blend of this paleo diet concept where we're eating like honey and berries and we're not eating grains which are cultivated. We're just eating those types of plants, but incorporating them in with primarily the beef and the eggs. So you can die. Okay, it's gonna take you a while to die. You're not gonna, just drop dead in 3 days, but you will eventually die. So you might remember the book and the movie called Into the Wild. And this was a book and a movie about a young man who decided that he wanted to go out into the wilderness and live off the land and sort of live in like a natural state for humans, right? Kind of going back to state of nature, so to speak. And so he went out into Alaska and he entered a national park in Alaska and he was going to live off the land. And unfortunately, he was able to catch rabbits and live off of rabbits, and then he was also foraging for things. But unfortunately, if you only consume rabbit meat, which is a very lean cut of meat, you will unfortunately eventually starve to death. So they're not quite sure why this young man died. They did find his body after several months. They're not exactly sure why he died, but it's very likely that he died of what is called rabbit starvation, or just eating these lean cuts and not getting enough fat, and then you're not consuming any plants which contain glucose. The other theory is that he ate a poisonous plant and that's why he died. So it's a tragic tale, but it is a bit of it illustrates a known phenomenon that you can't just eat protein. You have to have, at a minimum, you have to have fat with the protein. So with the strict carnivore diet where you're only eating, say, beef, some people, they will only eat ribeyes. Ribeye is a very fatty cut of beef. If you're having ground beef in the carnivore diet recommendation, you wouldn't get that lean, like 93% cut. You'd get like that 80% cut. You'd get that fattier cut of the ground beef. Eggs obviously have a lot of fat in the yolk. So you can survive without eating plants if you're eating enough fat like they recommend. It's not something that's dangerous, right? Just eating like chicken breasts and that's it. You actually are putting yourself in a potentially dangerous situation because that chicken breast doesn't have a lot of fat in it. So when you consume that protein and fat, our body can actually take a protein or amino acids and convert it to glucose. So that's why you don't have to eat glucose. Okay. We can actually convert those proteins into glucose. So with the carnivore diet, just eating protein and fat, you are going to have some biochemical changes within your body that can be positive for migraine sufferers and for particularly diabetics or people who want to lose weight or improve their body composition. So if you just eat protein and fat, you're going to keep your blood sugar very, very steady because you're not consuming plants with a lot of glucose in them that are spiking your blood sugar. And whenever you have a spike in your blood sugar, you're going to have a drop in your blood sugar. So if you eliminate the glucose from the plants and just eat the protein and the fat, this is going to keep your blood sugar very, very steady. So most migraine sufferers are pretty aware that if you miss a meal, right? If you start to get too hungry, oh, I could get a migraine. I used to be very, very susceptible to this. So most migraine sufferers are very aware of this and they know I can't miss a meal, or if I leave my house, I better have snacks in my purse, right? Because if I have that low blood sugar episode, I might get a migraine. That used to be me. I used to not leave my house without snacks because if I got hungry, I was very susceptible to blood sugar spikes and drops. And then once that drop hit, if I didn't get my glucose up quick, I was going to get a migraine. And so if you just eat protein and fat and you're not consuming that glucose, you're not going to have those glucose spikes and drops. And then you're going to keep your blood sugar very, very steady. So from a migraine standpoint, this could be helpful to people because you're eliminating those blood sugar drops, which is a stressor that most of us are very susceptible to. So that would be a point in the favor of the carnivore diet. What a lot of proponents of the carnivore diet will say is that the plants are trying to kill us and therefore we shouldn't eat them. So have you heard that one? So let me break this one down because this is really a fundamental part of the carnivore diet. So plants, they can't move around, right? They're rooted in the ground. So if an insect comes up to eat them, how are they going to survive? They don't have any defenses, right? If an animal, right, if a rabbit detects a coyote in the area, the rabbit can run away from the coyote. Right? So plants can't run away from their predators. So what do? They create what are called phyto, means plant. Toxin means poison, right? So plants create phytotoxins or plant toxins or poisons. And so it might be a little chemical that's like an insecticide. So then if the insect munches on the leaf, the insect dies, right? And so eventually the insects evolve to not eat that plant. The same thing, right? If the plant creates these toxins and then an animal eats the plant and gets sick, then eventually the animal evolves to not eat that plant. And so this definitely affects us humans. I want you to think about all of the different types of plants that are on planet Earth. How many of them do we actually eat? Very, very few of them, right? You're not going to go out into the woods and just pick up a leaf and start eating it, right? You know that it's going to make you sick. A lot of things are out and out, tremendous poisons where somebody could be dead within a matter of minutes if they consume it. So yes, the plants, in a sense, are trying to kill us. They are full of these plant poisons. Even the plants that we do eat, they do have these phytotoxins in them. So the carnivore proponents say, well, if the plants are trying to kill us and they're full of these poisons, it's probably not a good idea to eat them. Okay, so if we eliminate them, we're going to eliminate all of these poisons from entering in our body. And then why wouldn't our health improve? Why wouldn't we feel better because of that? So, what they're picking up on here is what I call the second principle. So, if you've been following the podcast, if you've taken some of my free trainings, I talk about the three things that we have to do to restore our health and maintain our health. And these are the three things that we have to do if we want to stop getting migraines, because we are getting migraines because we are not in a state of health, and our body generates like migraines and a whole host of other things when we are not in a state of health. So let me just review those principles for you really quick. So the first thing that we have to do to restore our health and maintain our health is we have to get the nutrients that our cells need to every cell in the body. I call that the first principle. The second principle is we have to clear metabolic waste material and other toxins. And the third principle is we have to restore our resiliency and vitality. So the carnivore diet proponents are picking up or keying into this third universal principle that's required to restore our health and maintain our health. We have to eliminate metabolic waste material and toxins from the cell, from our body. So if you're eating plant toxins, right? If it's like, okay, well, let's not put those in, and I'm going to lower the toxin burden in the body, and that's going to help my body recover. And from that standpoint, they are correct. So this is what I call the plant toxin slash nutrient paradox. Okay. So on the one hand, you could call these molecules within the plants phytotoxins. That's one side of the coin. The flip side of the coin is that those same molecules are nutrients or plant nutrients. So what people typically call antioxidant nutrients are nutrients. So these are things like curcumin, resveratrol, all of these little plant nutrients that you hear about. Most people call them antioxidants. Those are plant nutrients slash toxins. So what do I mean by this? So those little they might be called phytochemicals, those plant chemicals, when we eat those, our digestive tract breaks the little plant down, breaks the little leaf down, and those little phytotoxins are liberated and released, and they are absorbed into our bloodstream through our digestive tract. So you can open up any anatomy textbook and learn that the digestive tract is drained by what is called the portal vein. So all of the nutrients that we eat, so all of the phytonutrients, the minerals, the vitamins, the amino acids, the fatty acids, all of those nutrients, the first place they go to is what is called the portal vein. So it's this big vein that is connected through to our small intestine and our large intestine. And all of those nutrients just go right into that vein. Now, where does that vein go? That vein goes right to our liver. Okay, so everything coming into our body from our digestive tract goes into those portal veins and then goes right to the liver. Our body detoxifies all of the nutrients that we eat before they circulate throughout the rest of the body. So it's not like those nutrients are just kind of going into your bloodstream and just starting to float around and just go wherever they want. They're going into the portal vein, and that goes into the liver first. And all of those phytotoxins are detoxified by your liver first. and then they enter the general circulation. So, what starts off as a toxin is transformed, so to speak, by your liver into a nutrient. Okay. So, this is something that the carnivore people don't really talk about. They're just talking about these phytochemicals, plant chemicals. They're toxins, right? They're trying to kill us. The plant is making them as part of their defense mechanism. So we shouldn't eat them. But I mean, what about all the studies that talk about all the benefits of these nutrients? All of these great molecules that are in the plants. Don't we have all of these studies telling us of all of the benefits? Don't we have all these supplements that people take that are just jam-packed with all of these phytochemicals or so what's real this is so how can both of these things be true? They are both true. The liver has to detoxify these phytochemicals or plant chemicals, and what could be a poison can also be a nutrient or a benefit. So that's a little bit of the physiology, the anatomy and the physiology of what's happening here. So why do I call this a paradox? So, when we consume particularly plants, we are going to have an influx of these phytomolecules, these plant molecules, and they are toxic until they're processed by the liver and then they become beneficial. So, when you eat plants, you're actually burdening your liver with the processing of these plant molecules. So let's take a look at the person who is not feeling well and is considering going on a carnivore diet, right? So they have migraine headaches, they have eczema, they have allergies. Every time they get sick, they've got a lung problem and they've been told that they're pre-diabetic, okay? Those symptoms are symptoms of a toxin overload or a waste material overload within the body. And I go into these symptoms in more detail in my free training called the 5 Steps to Healing Migraines Naturally. We will link to that in the show notes here. But these symptoms all tell us that the body is overburdened with waste material and toxins, which means your liver is already struggling, is already overloaded. And so then when you eat plants, you are by definition adding even more to the load. So if you eliminate all of those plants from your diet, you're going to eliminate that toxin load coming in from the plants. But then you're also going to eliminate the benefits that you would receive from those phytochemicals after the liver has processed them and turned them from a toxin into a benefit. You're going to be missing out on that. But in the near term, in the immediate term, if I'm overloaded with waste material and toxins and I stop eating plants, I'm going to take a little bit of a load off of my liver. And so that's why the symptoms that are touted as responding to the carnivore diet, that's why those particular symptoms respond so well to the carnivore diet, because they're all symptoms in particular of a toxin overload within the body. So with my clients, if I have a client that is having a significant number of migraine headaches, so once we approach, 20 or more headache or migraine days a month, we have a very, very significant toxin overload in the body. That's just by definition. And so many times I will have them eat a little bit less colorful diet for a few weeks, because the more colorful the plants are, the more chemicals or phytonutrients or phytotoxins are going to be in that plant food, generally speaking. So with my clients, I will have them actually reduce the color content of what they're eating, again, for a short period of time, because I know, number one, It's going to be a little bit easier for their digestive tract to break those foods down because they're not as nutrient dense. They're a little bit less colorful. And then I'm not going to be putting so much of a strain on the liver to detoxify all of those nutrients. And it works very well, but we don't need to eat like that forever. We just need to eat like that for a little while until we can get enough relief. But I actually started doing this and experimenting with this based on my experience of doing the carnivore diet and also the cowboy diet. So when I started experimenting with this around 2019, and I will do a lot of experiments like this on myself. Pretty much I test everything out on myself first before I introduce it into my work with clients. So just based on how I could tell that I was responding and reading about the theory that the carnivore diet proponents were making with this phytotoxin or plant poison theory, kind of a light bulb went off for me at that time. And I realized that I could leverage what we know about this in my work, but not in such an extreme way. And it's been very, very successful. So in that sense, right, there's something to be gleaned here from what we know about this nutrient phytotoxin, what I call paradox. There's something to be gleaned from what we know about the physiology of the digestive tract and the liver. So that's wonderful. And so this is why people will get a benefit out of eliminating or significantly reducing the amount of plants that they're eating. So you could say, well, then what's the downside, right? Why wouldn't I eat like this all the time then? Well, there's a couple downsides to it. So number one, most people, if they're feeling that poorly, right? You have to be feeling pretty bad to do the carnivore diet. I mean, it's such an extreme diet that most people would say, yeah, well, I just have a few aches and pains. I'll live with it, right? So that I can eat my mashed potatoes, or, I can have a piece of cake on at a birthday party. So the people who are going to be motivated enough to do the carnivore diet, they're going to be really, really suffering with pretty significant symptoms. Because let's face it, unless we're really suffering, we're not that motivated to make changes. And so the extreme nature of the change kind of has to match the amount of suffering that we're in. Now, if you're suffering that much with those symptoms, with other symptoms, there's two other principles at play here, right? The carnivore diet proponents are really just kind of picking up on what I call that second principle, one out of three components. The other two components are the first principle is getting the nutrients to every cell in the body, and the third principle is our resiliency and vitality. So what would prevent someone from getting the nutrients to their cells? Well, the biggest blocker to getting the nutrients that your cells need to your cells is your digestive function. Okay, so overwhelmingly, when people are really suffering with severe symptoms like chronic migraines, overwhelmingly their digestive function is poor, but they are not breaking their food down very well, and they're experiencing digestive symptoms. So most people are experiencing things like heartburn, belching, indigestion, bloating, difficulty with their bowel movements, either loose stools or constipation, hiccups, lack of saliva production, canker sores. I mean, if you have anything going on, mouth to tail, so to speak, you shouldn't be aware of anything happening within your digestive tract. We should just eat our food and then have a bowel movement and really not be aware of anything in between. So that's not the typical American. The typical American is experiencing some level of digestive symptoms because, we know this because some of the biggest money makers, either for the prescription or over-the-counter medication industry, are things for your digestion, right? So just changing your diet is not going to be that beneficial for a lot of people because it really isn't going to matter that much what they eat. they're not breaking their food down that much anyway. If you go on a very, very restrictive diet, like the carnivore diet, where you're just eating ribeyes, now I have eliminated all of the variety that I'm putting into my digestive tract, and that will actually make it a little bit easier for my digestive tract to break that food down. Because if I'm eating a wide variety of foods, my digestive tract has to be able to handle a wide variety of foods. If I'm just eating one or two types of foods, well, now my digestive tract doesn't have to work that hard. It just has to work hard enough to break down those one or two foods. So this is why, again, these types of like extreme restricted diets or elimination diets, this is why people will feel a little bit better, because they are making it easier for their digestive tract to actually function. Then they're going to start breaking that food down better, and they're actually going to have more nutrients coming into their body, right? So if I'm eating a wide variety of food, but I can't break any of it down, I'm not getting the benefit out of that. I'm really not getting that many nutrients into my body, versus if I'm just eating ribeyes, well, okay, this is, I don't have to work so hard to break this down. My digestive tract is like, oh, okay, just one thing to focus on. I'll focus on that. So even though the total nutrient content is going to be less if I'm just eating ribeyes, well, at least I'm breaking the ribeye down and I'm getting the nutrients out of the ribeye into my body. So I might have a net benefit actually by doing that. And then finally, the third principle is our resiliency and vitality. So this corresponds to the not only the literal cellular voltage within the cells, but the vitality of what some people might call our life force. Within naturopathic medicine, we call it our vital force, the organizing energy of the body, the animating energy of the body. Like, we are alive, right? So there's something powering us. That resiliency and vitality, that has to be strong and robust to keep us in a state of health, keep everything working properly, keep us in a state of homeostasis. We absorb vitality from our environment. So when we go outside and we're within the vitality of the earth, we will absorb some of that vitality. If there's vitality in our food, we will absorb that vitality from the food into our body as well. So if you're eating carnivore diet, you're like getting ribeye steaks and grilling them and eating them, you're not eating processed food. You're eating very fresh food. You can determine, or you can get an insight into the amount of vitality in the food that you're eating based on how quickly it rots. So in order for food to rot, there has to be a life force in the food. There has to be some vitality within the food in order for the food to rot. So a lot of Americans are eating what is commonly called processed food. I like to call it factory-made food. I think that's more accurate. Factory-made food, you get a granola bar. The granola bar is made in a factory. It might be organic. It might be very quote-unquote clean ingredients, but that granola bar isn't going to expire for another year after you purchase it. And it was made in the factory before you even bought it. Versus if you were going to make granola at home, you wouldn't just keep that in the pantry for a year. You're using fresh ingredients at home that have some vitality in it, and those granola bars are going to go rancid a lot quicker than the organic granola bars that you get at Whole Foods with an expiration date from a year from now. So if you buy ribeye at the butcher counter, you got to grill that ribeye pretty quick, or it's going to start to rot in your refrigerator, right? So when people switch to carnivore diet and they're just eating like fresh beef, fresh eggs, they're eating food with a lot of vitality in it, and they're going to absorb that vitality into their body as well. And so that's going to increase their own vitality a little bit. So for these reasons, right, I've gone on a very restrictive diet, which takes a lot of pressure off my digestive tract. So now my digestion can actually break the food down and get the nutrients out of the food and into my bloodstream. So I checked a box within that first principle. Within the second principle, I've eliminated the phytotoxins slash nutrients. So I'm not burdening my liver as much to detoxify the nutrients that are in my food. So I've checked a little box on that second principle. And now I'm just like grilling ribeyes and cracking eggs, fresh food. I'm not eating the factory made food or that I used to eat. So now I'm absorbing a little bit more vitality from the food that I'm eating. And so this is why people are going to see an improvement in their symptoms and in their health if they eat carnivore diet. That all sounds great until you'd like to have a piece of birthday cake at your own birthday party. Okay. So this is the downside of diet or any of these restrictive diets. They really prevent you from just kind of enjoying your life. I mean, eating food with our kin is one of the most basic human experiences. We've been sitting around the campfire breaking bread with our kin since the dawn of time. And when we can't do that, it really impacts us as human beings. In fact, people get kind of irritated with you if you don't eat their food. Have you noticed that, right? Have you done some of these migraine diets and you're like, oh, can't eat tomatoes. I can't eat, I can't eat any beans. I can't eat any nuts. I can't eat any avocados. And then you try to go over to a family member's house and they make this nice meal for you. And then you're like, well, I can't eat anything. They get a little irritated. I don't think they're getting irritated because they're just, jerks that don't understand that you have migraines. This is a primal wiring that we humans have. We want to eat with our kin. And so when we are eating in a way that takes us away from being able to break bread with our kin, it's very painful both for us and for our kin. And so like I say, I've done carnivore diet a few times for a few months at a time. I've given it a good go each time. And you can survive. You can eat that way. In one sense, it's kind of nice because you don't have to think about meal planning or what you're going to eat. You just eat your ground beef or you eat your ribeye or you eat your eggs. And so from that perspective, it takes a little bit of that meal planning stress away. But it's not sustainable long term, just from a human perspective. You're not going to be able to break bread with your kin, and we need to be able to do that. So that would be number one downside. And like I say, even the people that have been big proponents of the carnivore diet, many of them are no longer eating carnivore diet anymore because eventually you're going to feel a lot better with plants. We're omnivores, we aren't carnivores, okay? So we humans are designed to eat a wide variety of foods, including plant foods. And we have a liver. So, yeah, we can't eat, poisonous plants, but we can eat the plants that we are designed to eat because we have a liver that's going to detoxify those phytotoxins and turn them into beneficial phyto. So all of those studies showing the benefits of all of these plant nutrients, they're not wrong. So if we have good digestive function, we can break down our food properly and we can break down a wide variety of food properly. We can get that wide variety of nutrients into those portal veins. The portal veins are going to take those nutrients, put them through the liver. Our liver is going to detoxify those nutrients and make them beneficial to us. And then they're going to come out of the liver, beneficial, circulate through our body, and they are going to be delivered to every cell in our body. And this is really what we should be focusing on. So again, with my clients, I won't put people on a strict carnivore diet. But if someone is really, really suffering, has very, very poor digestion, overwhelming migraines, yes, I will have them reduce the nutrient content, particularly the plant nutrient content in their food a little bit for a short period of time so that we can take the edge off of things. But I don't have them not eat any plants. That's going to be counterproductive and very difficult to implement. But when everything is functioning well, We can eat a wide variety of food. We can break the food down, detoxify the nutrients that are in the food to make sure that they're beneficial. Our liver has the capacity to do that, and we're not overloading it, and we're eating fresh food with vitality, right? This isn't rocket science. You're supposed to eat your vegetables. Yes, you're supposed to have some healthy fats. This is not rocket science here. And so when I work with my clients, I teach them how to put that together. How do I know that I'm eating enough protein, getting enough fat, and eating enough plants with all of these beneficial phytonutrients in it? And how do I do it in such a way that I keep my blood sugar steady throughout the day so that I'm not spiking and dropping my blood sugar and tipping myself over into a migraine state? It's not that hard to do. And then when your digestion is working well, it can handle that wide variety of food. Your liver has some capacity to detoxify those nutrients. And yeah, we can't just eat factory food, guys. We all know this. I know it's tough. Everybody's very busy. But I teach my clients, okay, how do we get the most bang for the buck? We are going to eat some factory foods in this day and age. I don't know about you, but I've never made my own butter. I have the factory make the butter for me. I don't know about you, but I've never bought olives and pressed them in a press and squeezed the oil out of those olives to make my olive oil. I have the factory make my olive oil. In this day and age, in America, we are going to have the factory make some of our foods. But we want to, everybody knows, right? We shouldn't just have a whole diet that's just processed foods or factory foods. Everybody knows this. So we are going to have some factory foods. We want to maximize the other fresh foods that are in our diet. When you put all of those pieces together, you're going to be able to eat in a restaurant. You're going to be able to go on vacation and enjoy some nice meals on the trip, maybe even some, treat foods. You're going to be able to go over to somebody's house and break bread with them and eat with your kin. You're going to be able to have a piece of birthday cake on your birthday and not get a migraine. Trust me, I know. So we don't have to eat in these extreme ways. We don't have to go on all of these elimination diets. We want to be able to eat and tolerate as wide a variety of food as we like. We want to be able to break the food down and get the nutrients out of those foods. And we want to have enough capacity in our liver to detoxify the nutrients in our food. And then we want to have enough vitality stored up so that, yeah, if I do go on vacation and I am eating a lot of processed foods or factory-made foods, most restaurants are using factory-made food when you eat in them. I've got enough vitality built up that I can go on that nice trip and have a decrease in the vitality in the food that I'm eating and not be affected. So this is really what we should be shooting for instead of sort of looking for like these extreme measures. And I have another podcast that we'll link to in the show notes that's called What's the One Thing I Need to Do for My Migraines? Because this is how we're oriented to think. Our mind is always looking for like, what's the one thing that's causing this problem? Because if there's one thing that's causing this problem, then I can eliminate that one thing and then I'll feel better. But when it comes to chronic migraines, other chronic health concerns, it's never just one thing. It's a very complex interaction between these three principles that I talk about that's really driving the problem. So it's not, but our mind wants that one thing. Like, what's the one way that I need to eat to solve this problem? And this is how people sell a lot of books, right? How many more migraine diet books do we need? Like, this is the way you need to eat if you have migraines. This is not the case. You and I do not need to eat in a special way because you and I are both prone to migraines. We need to eat in a way that's health supporting. And eating in a way that's health supporting is true for everybody on the planet. It's true for me. It's true for my husband. It's true for my daughter. If I have to eat in a certain way because I'm prone to migraines, now I've got to make my special food. Well, then what do my husband and my daughter eat? Now I got to make something separate for them, or I can't be included, or I have to sit here with my boring migraine food while my family is eating something nice. I'm telling you, this is not necessary. What's health supporting for me is going to be health supporting for everybody in my family. So let's just all eat in a way that's health supporting. So let's have you work on that within your own home so that you're not having to make separate meals, separate food for yourself. Oh, that looks so good. I wish I could eat it. You don't have to live like this. So, in general, we should be eating in a health supporting way. And then when we have enough kind of enough resiliency and vitality stockpiled, we've got enough nutrients stockpiled, we have a liver that's not overwhelmed, then we can enjoy the nice little treat foods because let's face it, life isn't worth living if we're not going to be able to eat a piece of birthday cake at that birthday party, right? So this is what we want to shoot for, and we want to stop looking at, okay, what's the one way of eating, or what foods do I need to eliminate? You don't want to go down that road. I have had so many clients that when we start working together, they're only eating a handful of foods because they've eliminated, and they're still in that chronic migraine state. So again, I hope this was helpful to you, and I hope it kind of ties some of the pieces together. The problem is not the food per se, it's the interplay of what I call these three principles, and where you're in particular are struggling or having a blocker or a deficiency within these three principles. So, okay, I know I have chronic migraines, but where am I at within these three principles? I'd urge you to reach out because that's the first thing that we do with my clients is we do a detailed assessment to determine exactly where are they at within these three principles. And then from there, we know, okay, now that we know where we're at, how do we change it? How do we put a game plan together to address those deficiencies or blockers or missing pieces within those three principles so that you can start feeling better again? And like I love to say, rediscover a migraine-free life. So thanks for listening. And let me know in the comments if you've ever tried the carnivore diet and what you thought about it. Talk to you guys soon.